Greetings, everyone. Let's go over how to write polynomial functions. You're going to want to take some notes for a few examples. You may need a calculator and, of course, a writing utensil. How can we use what we've learned so far in this unit to write an equation for this polynomial roller coaster? Well, let's take a look. I can visibly see the zeros at 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means I could write the factors x plus or minus 0, or just x minus 1, x minus 2, x minus 3, and x minus 4. It goes through the origin, so this is how we've been approaching this problem so far. But now we're going to take it a little step further. Last semester in the quadratics unit, we talked about intercept form for quadratic functions, meaning you have your factor and your factor, but now we want to make sure to take care of our a value. A is going to be our leading coefficient. The difference in this unit is we might have more than two factors because we've been dealing with cubes and even functions up to fourth degree. So what does this mean or look like in a problem? If I take a look at this graph, the first thing I want to identify are my zeros. My zeros are where my graph crosses the x-axis, which means their y value is always 0. So my zeros are 1, 0, 4, 0, and -3, 0. Now, in order to find my a value, I need a random point. I'm going to choose this random point. It's not on the x-axis. So my random point is going to be 0, -4. The 0 represents my x value, and the -4 represents a y value. That's called point form. We've learned that for a long time. Next, we're going to set up our polynomial. I'm going to start off with y equals. For my leading coefficient, I'm just going to say a for right now. And I'm going to write my zeros as factors. So x minus 1, x minus 4, and x plus 3. Notice the change in signs there. Now I want to take that random point and plug it in. Wherever there's a y, put a -4. Wherever there's an x, I'm going to put 0. Now I can fill in the rest of what I see. I've still got my a, still have my -1, my -4, and my +3. From there we want to simplify. Let's see how far we can get this. -1, -4, +3. Let's multiply those out. +12 with my a, -4. Let's get a by itself. A equals -1/3. Now you'll notice the directions say write the cubic function. They don't just say find a. So for my final answer, I need to rewrite this function here, but I need to plug in my a value. So I'm going to say for my final cubic function, y equals -1/3 with my factors. So with everything we've done this unit, the factors part is straightforward. We just have to do a little bit of work to get that a value. Let's take a look at another example, and this time you're not given the graph. So the first thing you need to decide is which one of these are your zeros. Remember, your zeros are on the x-axis. Therefore, their y value is 0. you need to be careful to identify these correctly, which means that 2, 1 is my random point. And I'm going to identify that by labeling it as xy so that I remember when I come back later. Let's start our function. Y equals, we have our factors plus 2, plus 0, minus 1. And now we want to add in that a value. We want to take our random point now and plug it in for the x's and the y's. So y is now 1, and all the x's are now 2. And just bring everything else down. Let's do a little bit of work. Bring down your 1, your a. Let's take care of these parentheses. Simplify another step. 4 times 2 times 1. Divide both sides. A equals 1/8. Again, it says write a cubic function. It didn't say just find a, so I have to do a little bit of work. I want to take my original function, but this time I'm going to plug in my a value. You can leave it as x plus 0, or if you choose, you can also write it as 1/8 and just have that x out front instead of having x plus 0. Both of these would be the correct cubic function, and it's written in factored form. Those two examples represented the first type of problem we want to make sure we understand, writing that cubic function in factored form. This is the second type of problem you're going to encounter. This time I'm going to give you the a value. I'm going to tell you a is 1. So that starts off pretty nice. I'm going to write y equals, a is 1. My factors, or my zeros that I have here, are x minus 2 and x plus 1. Oops, that should be a 1 there. But now I've got a 2i. This 2i is what makes this problem unique. So off to the side, I'm going to do a little bit of work. My x, or my 0, equals 2i. Think of this. We're taking our work we've done with find all zeros, and we're working backwards. So I represents a negative square root. That's where it comes from. Now, if I took the square root of a number and I got 2, that means the opposite, or squared of 2, would be 4. Take a look how that looks both ways if I went one to the next or back. Now my goal is to move everything to one side. So I'm going to start by squaring both sides. When I square a square root, that cancels the square and square root. So I'm left with x squared equals negative 4. Keep moving everything to one side. What you do to one, you do to the other. So let's add 4 over to the left side. Now it's equal to 0, which means that is my factored form for that 0. So I'm going to say x squared plus 4. What's nice about this is you can work backwards and check your answer. My 0 is 2, negative 1, and if I did a little bit of work here, I'd end up at positive and negative 2i. Let's take a look at another example. In this one, I'm also giving you that a equals 1. Let's check out the first few zeros. We'll have a minus 4 and a plus 1. So those are taken care of. Now I have to do a little bit of work for this square root and I. Let's start with the square root. I'm going to take my square root of 3 and set it equal to x. I want to move everything to one side, so I'm going to square both sides. Squaring a square root makes it so that we're left with the 3. Now to move that 3 to the other side, since it's positive, we're going to have to subtract it. So my third factor is x squared minus 3. Alrighty, let's take a look at our fourth 0 here. It's listed as 5i. X equals 5i. Let's go through those steps like the previous example. I is the result of a negative square root. If my result was 5, then the original value would have to be 25. Take a moment to see where that came from. I want to move everything to one side, so I'm going to square both sides, which means squaring a square root cancels that out. I'm left with x squared equals negative 25. It's a negative 25, so I'm going to add it to the other side. Now it's equal to 0. So that is my fourth factor that I have up here. So now we can see we've taken care of all of the zeros that were provided and wrote them in factored form, and our a value was 1. Again, take some time with these examples on what to do with those square roots and those imaginaries. Your assignment is attached in Google Classroom. The problems are very similar to these examples, so this video will help a lot. So take your time and let me know if you have any questions.